Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. Just wanted to do a follow-up to the video on the way of the Nomad, bugging out, and SHTF. In that video I talked a bit about how nomadism was the original mode of subsistence of mankind, and that in a grid-down situation it may well be a feasible option for some people depending on the environment that they're in. And I use the Canadian boreal forest as an example of that. And I did have some feedback from one subscriber who noted that, you know, there's a reason why the boreal forest is so sparsely populated, or was so sparsely populated, in that it was not suitable to human habitation. And I did offer a slight rebuttal to that, in that, you know, there were Native American people who to this day still live in the Canadian woodlands, and perhaps many of them did not survive the colonialization. And I know you know, there was a lot of stuff in Canada with the residential schools, and there was definitely a lot of foul play along with dislocating the native people. So on some points I can agree with the commenter. I believe it was Struggle Buggy. I can't remember exactly what the YouTube name was, but he offers some really good insights anyways. He's always got some interesting things to say when he does comment, and so I do respect you for commenting there, brother. And although I would have to disagree to some extent, because there is an abundance of wildlife in the Canadian North, and for a hunter-gatherer society, it's definitely, you know, hunter-gatherer society could subsist. And most hunter-gatherers were nomadic. So, you know, you stayed at a place for a certain period of time, and then you move on. There are pastoral nomads who herd flocks without the buffalo on the plains anymore, which, you know, after a couple decades would probably start to retake the prairies, honestly, if there was enough. That doesn't take long for nature to correct itself. So long as there's a few herds, chances are they'll reproduce rather quickly. But pastoral nomads, I'm not sure if you'll see a lot of that. You might see some of that in a total grid down collapse. I mean, it's purely theoretical, right? But it's something that you could see, people with herds and grazing, moving with the graze wherever the grass is, essentially. And after that, of course, is the horticultural level, which indeed is a good mode of subsistence. And I don't necessarily argue against that, although I would say that, you know, there's something about the nomad that is, maybe it's just fantastic thinking, but there's something about the nomad that seems stronger than the horticulturalist. I mean, it's a more primitive mode of being, indeed. And I like the quote from that zombie movie, what's it called, World War Z, where Brad Pitt briefly utters the words, "Movement is life." And it's so true. And to be sedentary is no way to live. You know, there's no way that you can have any quality of life or any progressive movement, any evolution without movement. And so that's why I'm not, staunchly against the nomadic approach like some people are. Some people are very, swear against bugging out, and I think Struggle Buggy had mentioned that, he felt that only 99% of people could survive in the Canadian wilderness. And I think that's true if you're talking about putting a person who's completely naked into that environment and having them try to make everything from scratch. I'm talking like sinew, bowstrings, and bow drill fires and shit like that. But I think if you're talking about incorporating some of our modern technology into that endeavor, I think that survival rate goes up immensely to, I'd say, almost 20%. If you had a person with modern tools trying to exist in that environment, I think it's going to go up substantially. I think where it goes down significantly is when you're looking at it from a full-on bushcraft perspective. Then indeed, not many people would be able to survive that if thrown into the bush naked. There are some wilderness gurus like Dave Canterbury and Cody Lundeen who may well thrive in that sort of circumstances, but chances are, yes, indeed, few people would be able to survive that. And my response to his comment on that was that, as human beings, we all have within us an animalistic side. We all have a beast within us. We all have the potential to return to that animalistic state if we suppress enough of our cognitive and social conditioning. You can't just eradicate 1 million years of biological evolution through 1,000 years of modernity. So, as much as I agree with him on the fact that, it is, there is a reason why, it's not vastly populated in the Canadian North, I still do think it is possible, and it probably is one of the few places on Earth, due to the low population density, where it is entirely possible to subsist off the land. There are lakes in Canada. I mean, there's millions of lakes, probably more in the hundreds of thousands, but there's so many lakes that are stocked full of fish, and fish pretty much provide everything the body needs. So just in fishing, you could have a viable subsistence level. Throw on top of that, land game, moose and elk and deer, and when you use all that, the hides from those animals for shelter and clothing, it's not going to be a pretty lifestyle. It's going to be very dog eat dog, so to speak. But it could be done, is what I'm saying. It can be done, and especially if one was to, befriend what remains of the Native Americans who still in some parts practice the traditional ways of living, then indeed you could thrive in that environment. But movement is life, and the hunter-gatherer nomadic mentality, once the grid goes down, we're going to revert potentially to that mode of subsistence, because, as I said before, the energy flows in certain ways. And when I say the energy, I mean the calories, the food. You have to follow the food, and the food's always moving. food's never sedentary. Very few creatures are sedentary creatures. Many operate within a given area, and they have a territory, but that territory is subject to change annually. And so I think the prepper should try to find a midpoint. I believe that there's a midpoint between bugging out and bugging in that's not commonly understood and discussed. And that midpoint, I don't know what you would call it necessarily. I haven't really figured out a word for it, but it would be something to the effect of bugging in, but being able to move your operation, your entire operation, if necessary, rather quickly. So with the expedience of a Plains Native American who would pack up the teepees and follow the buffalo, and eventually they would of course settle down for weeks, if not months at a time, but they follow the buffalo. So I think there's something to say about not being able to bug out per se, but being able to move, being able to relocate while preserving the majority of your resources. So I don't know what we would call this. It would be sort of semi-bug out, I don't know what you would necessarily call it. But let me know what you think about this, and by all means, like, comment, subscribe. Keep the comments coming. There's nothing more I like than hearing responses like that challenge what I say, because it forces me to rethink and reconsider things. And I really appreciate the feedback. And I'm almost at 100 subscribers here, so that's kind of exciting for me, and I appreciate all the support that I've had. And by all means, do video responses if you so choose. It's always good to hear, especially some of the subscribers who usually comment. It's always good to hear what you have to say, and it would be nice to hear it in more depth through a video response. So let me know what you think. Canadian Prepper out.